An English fable says that the king of fairies decided to give humans a gift and sent his right-hand fairy to deliver it. The messenger called for the humans to come. "It is true," she said, "you are all a bit short-sighted, but to help that inconvenience the king has sent you a gift." She opened an enormous bundle, and a great number of spectacles tumbled out. The people seized them, and there were enough for everyone to have their own pair. However, it was soon learned people didn't always see the same things out of their spectacles. For one pair it was purple, another blue, another white, and one black. Some of the glasses were red, green, yellow. They were all colors and every shade of color. The odd thing was that each person was delighted with their own pair and believed it was the very best, and that how they saw the world must be the one right way. In reading the story, I wondered if the fable was relayed correctly. In other words, was this a gift, or was it a mean trick to play on humans? A great many troubles of the world might be avoided if we weren't so wed to our own way of seeing things, and if we let go of our judgments on other people for seeing things a different way. Then again, perhaps the fable intends to remind us that the spectacles through which we see the world are not necessarily the only description of reality, and our view of the world could be enriched by trying to see things the way another person does. Unfortunately, we humans seem addicted to believing we have the one right view of the world. I remember being new in high school and telling my older brothers about a semi-documentary on space aliens that a teacher had shown us. My brothers scoffed at it, and like older brothers, they scoffed at me for being intrigued by the film. I stood my ground. I pointed out that I hadn't said I believed what the film proposed, only that it was about interesting possibilities. I also pointed out that nothing my brothers had said proved anything wrong about it, and they finally grudgingly admitted my point. I don't know if the teacher believed what the film said, but I've wondered if he wanted us to imagine possibilities outside of rigid lines of theory or scholarly pronouncements. If so, the lesson was well learned. I'll hear a fantastic story that my logic says the other person must have imagined, and yet there's a little voice inside that whispers there are more things on heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. No doubt the people of Jesus' time had certain expectations and ideas that shaped how they saw the world. But something happened that began changing their spectacles. They met a man who actually wasn't teaching anything different than their historic religious writings told them, but he had absorbed them thoroughly and really seemed to take seriously the idea that we should love an enemy the way the story of Jonah taught. He imbibed the idea that Proverbs presented, and that what we do to each other is the same as doing it to God. When he talked about the idea of loving God and loving neighbor, he didn't seem to be just quoting words, but something he'd integrated into his entire life. His followers struggled, but the way Jesus saw the world was so very attractive to them. Then came Jerusalem and the cross. Suddenly, it may have seemed to these disciples that the old view of the world, their old pair of spectacles, was accurate after all. Love was not more powerful than hate. Worldly powers could not be denied. Even their religious leaders had participated in getting Jesus arrested and crucified. One man, even a handful of men and women, couldn't change the world. They couldn't even change their own society. When the authorities of that time spread a rumor that the disciples had stolen the body, they were affirming their pair of spectacles. They feared the Romans, they feared chaos, they feared people who lived in hope of changing the world. There are those who delight in debating the facts of Easter, but there is one truth I can't get around. The disciples changed their spectacles after Easter. Their view of the world expanded and continued to expand. The genie couldn't be forced back into the bottle. In The Trial of Jesus by John Masefield, the story says Procula, the wife of Pilate, was greatly disturbed over the crucifixion of Jesus. A Roman soldier brought the news to her that the stone had been rolled from the tomb and that the stone was empty. She grew greatly perplexed and excited. She asked the soldier eagerly, "Where do you think he is?" The soldier replied, "Let loose in the world, lady, where no one can stop his truth." Well, let's face it, the Romans miscalculated. The Jerusalem authorities miscalculated. They all saw the world from such a limited perspective that you almost feel sorry for them. They were like Plato's people in the cave, where they thought the shadows on the wall were real life and had no idea how much more there was to experience. One writer contends that the world is often living on the wrong side of Easter Day. That like the disciples during those hours after Golgotha, we're still groping in the dark. We're living in the shadows of darkness and fear, or hopelessness and despair. We feel our hopeless inadequacy in the face of the grim facts of sin and chaos and of humanity's ruthless inhumanity to each other. But you know what? We don't have to stay in the cave. We aren't required to wear spectacles of fear or despair or hopelessness or inadequacy. There are a lot of people who have shed those spectacles, even if only for a moment. A boy saves for over a year to buy something he really wants. One day he hears how a family died because their house caught fire. They couldn't afford a smoke alarm. He goes to the local fire station, gives every penny he has saved to buy smoke alarms for people who can't afford them. A woman waits to get onto a busy road. It's rush hour, and everyone's so anxious to get home, they don't want to slow down for fear they'll miss a light. But one person stops, smiles, and gestures for the woman to get onto the street. A police officer has a choice of arresting a child stealing food. He learns the family is hungry and desperate. He buys them hundreds of dollars worth of groceries out of his own pocket. A woman has a pipe system break in her apartment and everything gets flooded. The professional fire department turns the water off and several come back on their day off to clean up the mess. A woman buys a jewelry box in a estate sale and comes back because she found money in the rear of the drawer and she wants to return it. A man struggles through flooding waters to help a stranded animal. Someone is trapped under a streetcar after an accident. It's going to take a long time for the crane to get the person free. Everyone's afraid that the person will go into shock. One man solves the problem by crawling under the wreckage and staying with the trapped individual until help arrives. An entire country goes mad and starts killing anyone who's Jewish, but a number of individuals risk everything to help save those whom they can. An 80-year-old man recently walked through a blizzard to rescue people. A man was handed $5,000 in a bag instead of his breakfast sandwich. He returns it to the relief of the employees who be in terrible trouble for losing the bank deposit. Teacher spends her own time to take 2 students on a fun Christmas shopping trip. A child is lost and hundreds turn out to help look. Someone in our Saturday group once described such stories as resurrection stories. I agree. Whether these people are Christians or not, whether they have faith of any kind, they show people who found a spark of love for humanity in their hearts, and wherever love is, there God is also living. We don't have to live on the wrong side of Easter. Jesus didn't. In fact, Jesus lived on the right side of Easter even before the crucifixion. He simply refused to see humanity or the world or God in ways that were hopeless or despairing. He refused to see love as powerless or forgiveness as too hard to accomplish. He saw life in all of its splendid possibilities. You ask me how I know he lives? Not just because he lives in my heart, but because I've seen him living in other people too. Love will not be denied. It has been let loose in the world. Let's live with Jesus on the right side of Easter. Amen.